The creation story, the well-known account of God's design of an inhabitable environment on earth and the creation of the creatures and plants within. The very first words of the Christian Bible and the Jewish Torah are the creation story, truly where our faiths begin. Some Christians see these stories as literal, creationists, they call themselves. Other Christians see these stories as artistic and mythical. Either way, if we believe that the Bible is God's living word for us, we are invited to trust that God intends for this creation story to instruct and enlighten us. This story gives us the guarantee of God's investment in our well-being. It gives us a glimpse into the nature of God, who is loving and nurturing. It gives us the assurance of God's involvement in creation, nurture, and the continual recreation of our world and our existence. It is a story of hope and companionship and promise. Let us enter into this story of creation today, not as cynics, not as scientists, but as people yearning to learn what the divine intends for us to discover through this sacred biblical story. In these first 3 days of creation, God is busy preparing the context, creating time and warmth, the atmosphere and land. God takes time with this, not rushing to the apex of the story or jumping to the meaty part, pun intended. God is careful and thoughtful about spending a full 3 days ensuring that the context and the climate and the conditions are right for flourishing of plants and animals and humans that are to come. In science, there's an expression called terraforming. It's defined as the process of deliberately modifying an atmosphere, temperature, surface topography, or ecology of a planet, moon, or other body to be similar to the environment on Earth, to make it habitable by Earth-like life. It is sometimes referred to the possibility of inhabiting other planets or the moon. And whether you believe it was literal or figuratively, God was and is a terraformer. And God has empowered us to be terraformers too. We are responsible to help maintain creation, and with God's help, continue the work of creation, nurture, and recreation of our planet. As we look at God's example in Genesis of the second day of creation, we see the effort and intentionality that God put into creating the atmosphere. And by looking at the atmosphere that God created as a guide, we can learn how we are called to create and manage the atmosphere here on earth. As co-creators of the atmosphere, as terraformers, we are called by God to these 3 creation goals. First, we must work to create an environment that is hospitable. Second, we must create an environment that is balanced. And finally, we must create and support structures that enable all life to thrive. So first, hospitability. In Genesis, God created an atmosphere that was hospitable and non-toxic, an atmosphere of safety that encouraged life to flourish. We, as individuals and as a community, do have the power over the atmosphere we create. In order to help continue and nurture an environment that is hospitable, we too must be mindful about creating a context that allows life to grow and thrive. Take a moment with me and think about a place or an occasion in your life when you felt fully comfortable and safe and loved. What was that like? What were the sense and sounds of that moment. When I was a very small child, we would spend Thanksgiving at Grandma Mare's and her significant other, Artie, at their home in North Bergen, New Jersey. I loved those visits, dressed up in lace and ribbons. Her home isn't there anymore, but this picture reminds me of her block. In the garage, Artie raised bunnies, and we would go out there and hold them, surrounded by the earthy smell and the soft sound of the excited bunnies' scurrying feet. Their home was always so warm and toasty. I would stand on the floor grate above the floor furnace to feel the warmth radiating up, and if I stood in the perfect spot, I could watch the flicker of the pilot light while I smelled the homemade apple sauce cooking on the stove, and I heard the banter and laughter of the grown-ups. Maybe you have a similar story of a place or a time when you felt safe and loved, a time or a place when the atmosphere was just right to help you thrive. Following God's example, we are called to create an atmosphere that allows life to flourish, an atmosphere that is abundantly loving, healthy, and nourishing. I love this story from the Gospel of Luke. Jesus appears to his disciples in this epic post-resurrection moment and says, "Hey, you have anything to eat?" He was seeking hospitality. Hospitality is welcome, generosity, and caring for others and their needs. Interestingly, even the earliest Christians were known for just this. While they were far from perfect, the earliest Christians were respected for the atmosphere they helped create. In one letter, dated around 130, an unnamed writer says this about the Christians: "They obey the prescribed laws and at the same time surpass the laws with their lives. They love all men and are persecuted by all. They are unknown and condemned. They are poor, yet make many rich. They are in lack of all things and yet abound in all. They are dishonored and yet in their very dishonor are glorified. They are insulted and repay the insult with honor. They do good yet are punished as evildoers. And when punished, they rejoice as if quickened into life." To sum it up all in one word, the writer says, what the soul is to the body, that are Christians to the world. The writer points to the Christian's love of neighbor and humbleness and kindness and compares them to the very soul of a person. Like these early Christians, the atmosphere we create in our homes and communities and the world can serve to nurture and inspire others. Ideally, the atmosphere we create would be focused on compassion, generosity, and kindness, and sustain all life, plants, animals, and humankind. The power of a good atmosphere to help living things isn't just hypothetical. In fact, there was a study quoted by The Guardian that considered the impact of love and kindness to plants. Plants grew better when spoken to kindly than they did when they were spoken to harshly. If that is true for plants, would that not be even more true for humans? We, as individuals and as a community of faith, have the power to affect our atmosphere, for the worse or for the better. We can create hospitable environments through forgiveness and hope, through helping others, through being mindful of our microaggressions and learning about our implicit biases, through welcoming others, through demonstrating patience, and through active listening. Through our words and actions, we have the power to create an atmosphere that's hospitable for all. And the atmosphere we create might make all the difference for someone, and it is contagious. So in addition to our call to create an environment that is hospitable, Flourishing is only possible if there is balance. Ecologists who look closely at nature can see that nature is dynamic and even chaotic, but ultimately we can see the interesting balance found in nature. From the impacts of sea-ocean temperatures, to the balance of predator-prey relationships, to the important contributions of the rainforest on our entire planet's well-being. Balance helps us thrive and is a key to creation. A specific example of this is oxygen. The human body needs at least 19.5% to survive. But we couldn't survive with too much either, which might cause runaway chemical reactions that could harm our bodies. Our air is about 21%. Perfect. Balance is important. We can help create an environment that sustains love and life by helping maintain balance. One way of doing this is by being mindful of the energy we exude. I saw this sign on social media, reportedly from the hospital at Indiana University. It says this: "Please take responsibility for the energy you bring into this space. Your words matter. Your behaviors matter. Our patients and our teams matter. Take a slow, deep breath and make sure your energy is in check before entering." Think back to a recent social gathering, or maybe a pre-pandemic holiday get-together, or maybe at your workplace or at a committee meeting. You might be able to identify someone who, when they came into the space, raised the level of anxiety in the room. Well, let's face it, there are probably times when each of us have been that person. And I also bet you can think of someone who is so calm and comforting that just being around that person helps lower your blood pressure. Their calm and balanced energy helps assure you that everything is going to be okay. In professional chaplaincy, we are trained to be a non-anxious presence. Frankly, this didn't and still doesn't always come naturally to me, even after 20 years of practice. I have to be really intentional about taking that deep breath and putting aside my own insecurities and worries and genuinely making that effort to exude love and compassion and non-anxiousness. In my own mind, I carry with me that sign from IU, that reminder to take responsibility for the energy I bring into the space. We can work on exuding calm and balance by incorporating gratitude practices in our daily routines, by taking good care of ourselves, even if we are super busy, through prayer and meditation, by setting healthy boundaries with people, and even by smiling and laughing more, even when it doesn't feel like it's coming naturally. Balance and calm, like hospitability, are contagious, and we have the power to offer that to help our atmosphere. In addition to hospitability and balance, we can help create a healthy atmosphere through structure. It's interesting that the word used here in the book of Genesis is the word for dome or vault. The Hebrew word literally refers to a solid structure, a firmament. It is easy to be distracted by the scientific inaccuracy of this description, as if the sky is a literal, hard, and tangible dome above us. As a former marine scientist, it does make me cringe, I gotta admit. But I deeply appreciate that this sort of language and belief would have been very familiar and comforting for those original listeners. And I also believe that structures, in a figurative sense, are essential to creating an atmosphere that enables thriving. We can't separate our ability to exist from the structures and systems which enable us to live and thrive, such as families, values, government, laws, education, and compassionate leadership. As we know from recent events, our structures and systems are far from perfect. Body cams, cell phone videos, investigative journalism, and courageous whistleblowers have helped reveal long-running structural and systemic inequities that have prevented historically marginalized individuals and communities from having equal access to resources and education, home loans and representation, and fair treatment by the criminal justice system. When our structures and systems are biased to prevent certain individuals or communities from thriving, we have the responsibility to help fix them, because by their nature, they cannot fix themselves. Having supportive structures and systems that enable flourishing for all living things is an essential part that we can play in creating and recreating our world. Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama are examples of people who, amid exile and persecution, strove to create atmospheres that were hospitable and balanced, and supporting structures that were fair and beneficial. They lived lives promoting kindness, nonviolence, positivity, and fairness. In doing so, they each discovered deep joy. The Book of Joy details conversations between these two men aimed at answering the questions about finding joy in suffering, ultimately discovering keys to flourishing. We too are striving to find joy and peace and hopefulness, even in the midst of some terrifying headlines and personal hardships. We too want to create environments of hope and positivity for others, even if or when our circumstances are difficult. With God's help, we have the power to create and recreate our atmosphere. We are terraformers. Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama say this: "No dark fate determines our future. We do. Each day and each moment, we are able to create and recreate our lives and the very quality of human life on our planet. This is the power we wield." So let us use our power to co-create an atmosphere that is hospitable for all, that is balanced, and that has structures that support and uphold all of humankind. In doing so, all living things will grow and thrive and reach their full potential, helping create the kingdom of God on earth. And God will see that it is good. May it be so. Amen.